genius. Rai Bhalit was a ruler of ancient Sindh, a part of undivided India. He was, by nature, very warlike. He was never content except when mounting an attack on a neighboring kingdom or waging war against an enemy. Once, ill luck befell Rai Bhalit. He was stricken with a painful disorder that prevented him from sitting on a horse or an elephant. To a man who lived by the noise and excitement of battle, this seemed like harsh punishment indeed. For some time, Rai Bhalit bore it bravely, but eventually found he could stand it no longer. He assembled the wisest and most practical men in his kingdom and said, "As you all know, I am afflicted with an illness that prevents me from sitting on horseback or on an elephant. And you also know that I am passionately fond of conducting military operations and placing troops on the field. Being unable to do so, I am utterly bored and restless in mind and body. I wish you could devise something that would give me the semblance of being involved in warfare, without making it necessary to sit on the horseback or on an elephant. It would be a great relief to me if I could engage in the occupation that I love most." The assembled men heard him in silence. None of them had any suggestions to offer. But at that point, a wise man named Sahasi came forward. He bowed low before his ruler and said, "Sire, I have something that I invented permission to present this contraption in court." Having obtained the permission, Sahasi hurried home and came back with a complete set of the game of chess. This included all the chessmen which he had made himself and a cloth on which to play the game. When this was displayed in court and the rules of the game duly explained, all the wise men gathered there burst into loud applause. As for Rai Bhalit himself, he was simply delighted. Beaming at Sahasi, he declared, "What you have accomplished is something unique. We are greatly pleased. As a reward, ask for anything that you desire, and it shall be given to you." Sahasi bowed low and thanked the king. He said, "Sire, to grant my request or not lies in the hands of your majesty, and I shall be content with your majesty's decision. But since I have been given permission, I shall state my request. I simply ask that a single grain of wheat be placed on the first square of the chess cloth and doubled on each succeeding square. What this means is 1 grain of wheat on the first square, 2 grains on the second, 4 on the third, 8 on the fourth, and so on. When all the squares on the chess cloth have been covered in this manner, I shall be deeply grateful if your majesty would command that this quantity of wheat be given to me." When Rai Bhalit heard this, he smiled. Something of great value. But he has gone and asked for something utterly trivial and insignificant. At this, Sahasi bowed his head and replied, "Sire, this is the only request that I wish to make. I do not require anything more. If your majesty would be so gracious as to grant it, I shall be perfectly satisfied." By then, Rai Bhalit was convinced that Sahasi was out of his mind, but he had a promise to keep. He therefore commanded his revenue officials to carry out the task. The officials began their calculations in accordance with the Rai's commands. But before long, a member of their group came running to Rai Bhalit. This man, trembling in fear, burst out before the king. Sire, we cannot obtain the quantity of wheat required to meet Sahasi's request in our entire country. It is simply impossible. When the Rai heard this statement, he naturally thought it was utter nonsense. Summon all the revenue officials here, he commanded. Let them show me how they arrived at this absurd conclusion. The revenue officials came soon enough, though with very long faces. They told the Rai that even if the wheat produce of the whole world were to be collected, it would not equal the quantity requested by Sahasi. On hearing this, Rai Bhalit was more amazed than ever before. He was certain his officials were exaggerating. So he commanded that all of them, experts at arithmetic, got down to work. They did their calculations all over again, once, twice, thrice, and repeated emphatically that it was beyond the power of anyone to comply with Sahasi's request. They also proceeded to prove their point. Placing a grain of wheat on the first square and doubling the number each time, they reached the 16th square. The quantity of wheat amounted to 32,760 grains, 5 se. At the 19th square, the quantity required was 40 se, a mun. At the 40th square, the quantity required was 2,970,152 muns, which was the produce of one city with its dependent lands and villages. For the 50th square, it was calculated that the produce of 1,024 such cities would be required. For the 60th square, the produce of 1,048,576 cities, and for the 64th, or last, square the produce of 16,777,216 cities. Taking the surface of the whole earth into account, even if there should be one city on each square mile, there would not be sufficient to furnish the quantity of wheat required to carry out the promise given to Sahasi. Hearing this astonishing statement, Rai Bhalit turned to face Sahasi and declared, "You are indeed a genius to have invented the game of chess, and even more of a genius to have asked for this astonishing reward." It was impossible to comply with Sahasi's request, but we are not told if Sahasi received or accepted any other reward instead. We do know, however, that Rai Bhalit was constantly occupied in playing chess right up to the time he passed away.